If you're a true fan of the Western genre, you've likely roamed the plains with some iconic cinematic legends. Sure, we all know the Searchers, the Wild Bunch, and the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. But have you ever heard of these hidden gems? If you thought you've seen it all, think again. Number 20, Skin Game, 1971. From 1971, we've got Skin Game, directed by Paul Bogart and Gordon Douglas. It's this really cool Western that zooms in on slavery in the American South back in 1857. So you've got Quincy Drew, this smooth-talking con man played by James Garner, and his partner in crime, Jason O'Rourke, played by Louis Gossett Jr. These two go from town to town pulling off this genius scam, where they sell Jason to slave owners, pocket the cash, and then set him free after the sale, only to rinse and repeat in a new town. But as you can imagine, things don't always go according to plan, and Quincy has to pull off his biggest con yet to save his buddy Jason. The chemistry between the lead guys is what really hooks you in. Their banter is sharp, and the actors nail their roles. Susan Clark also brings this delightful touch of humor to the story. And can we talk about that score? It's a total winner in my book. Number 19, True Grit, 1969 and 2010. True Grit was one of the last old-school Hollywood westerns back in '69. John Wayne, who snagged his only Oscar for it, really captures that aging, old-school western vibe perfectly. It's kind of melancholic and absolutely gorgeous. And here's the twist. It got one heck of a killer remake. So the brains behind this gem of a remake are none other than the Coen brothers, Ethan and Joel. You know, the guys who've cooked up some seriously good movies. Their 2010 version stars a bunch of heavy hitters like Josh Brolin, Matt Damon, Jeff Bridges, and Haley Steinfeld in her first big film. Steinfeld plays this 14-year-old out for revenge after her dad gets offed by a real scoundrel, played by Brolin. She teams up with a deputy marshal, played by Bridges, and a Texas Ranger, played by Damon, to settle the score. It's like a fresh take on an old classic, and it's pretty darn awesome. Number 18, The Big Gun Down, 1967. All right, now let's talk about The Big Gun Down, directed by the one and only Sergio Solima. And guess what? It's a freaking fantastic spaghetti western that stars none other than Lee Van Cleef himself. I mean, come on, the guy's the epitome of cool. In this flick, Van Cleef plays a bounty hunter on a mission to track down this guy named Cuchio Sanchez, who's accused of some real heinous stuff, raping and killing a 12-year-old girl. Yeah, it's heavy, but it makes for one heck of a thrilling cat-and-mouse showdown between these two. Now let me tell you, the cinematography is off the charts. The colors are rich, and those shots of the sprawling Italian countryside are a feast for the eyes. It's like a visual masterpiece. If you're digging this movie, I'd totally recommend diving into the spaghetti western genre. Check out classics like Death Rides a Horse and anything by Sergio Leone and Sergio Corbucci. You're in for a wild ride. Number 17, Lonely Are the Brave, 1962. Lonely Are the Brave is this cool western flick where Kirk Douglas plays a dude who's basically stuck in the Old West, even though the movie is set in modern times. Well, it was made in the same era it's set in. He's a Korean War vet dealing with some heavy stuff, and he ends up going head-to-head with the law, getting chased by cops all over New Mexico. And check this out, the cast is pretty darn impressive. You've got Gina Rowlands, Walter Matthau, and George Kennedy in the mix. They really bring this unique idea to life, and it hits you right in the feels at times. It's kind of strange that not many folks talk about it when they're yammering about great westerns, but let me tell you, it's still a gem and deserves more love. Number 16, The Oxbow Incident, 1943. Now we have William Wellman's The Oxbow Incident. So I've got a few westerns in this list that don't exactly fit the typical western mold, and this one's definitely one of them. In The Oxbow Incident, you won't find your classic cowboy hero swaggering into town to take down some evil bandits. Nah, this movie goes deep into the dark side of mob mentality and how violence can erupt from what seems like a bunch of morally upright folks. The story's all about this mob of guys who stumble upon a group of strangers they think are murderers and thieves. Henry Fonda takes the lead, and man, he gives one heck of a performance. But he's not the only standout here. Anthony Quinn and Dana Andrews bring some serious power to their roles, and Andrews in particular will tug at your heartstrings big time. With Wellman's direction and that stunning black and white cinematography, The Oxbow Incident is a tense and gripping Western classic that's definitely worth a watch. Number 15, The Great Silence, 1968. When it comes to Western movies, you won't find many darker ones than The Great Silence. This one's a real gritty and intense spaghetti Western that's easily up there with the all-time greats. So it's all about this mute gunslinger who takes on a bunch of ruthless bounty hunters in a small town they've got in their sights. And let me tell you, it's no walk in the park for him. What sets this flick apart is that bone-chilling, ice-cold setting that just adds to the whole brutality of the villains. The harsh conditions on screen amp up the intensity and make the whole thing downright harrowing. And you can't forget Ennio Morricone's music. It's yet another masterpiece from the legendary composer, and it cranks up the feels to the max. The Great Silence is a must-see for any Western fan, no doubt about it. Number 14, The Walking Hills, 1949. Next up from 1949, we have John Sturgis's The Walking Hills. Similar to The Oxbow Incident, this film brings a fresh twist to the Western genre with its mix of noir elements and a backdrop of endless sand dunes instead of expansive mountain ranges. Some of you might find it an unconventional choice, but we've included it because a lot of fans are really taken with the film's atmosphere. The scenes at nighttime, with everyone gathered in the dunes under the stars, exude a calming serenity. The movie is loaded with entertaining and unique characters, including the fantastic Randolph Scott. However, it's Josh White's soothing singing that steals the show for me. The plot follows a group of men on a quest to find a buried wagon train filled with gold amidst the dunes. As suspicion, deception, and danger creep into the group dynamics, the tension keeps you hooked. I'm particularly fond of the shots featuring all the characters together. The staging is a blast, and the soundtrack adds a charming touch. Number 13, Bone Tomahawk, 2015. Some of the coolest westerns can sneak in other genres and totally take you for a wild ride. Bone Tomahawk, written and directed by S. Craig Zahler, is a prime example. He brings together heavyweights like Kurt Russell, Patrick Wilson, and Richard Jenkins for this one. The story follows a sheriff, a gunslinger, a cowboy, and a backup deputy on a risky mission to rescue townspeople snatched by a group of Native Americans. But things take a dark turn when they get ambushed by the tribe, who turn out to be ruthless cannibals. This flick starts off like your regular Western, but gradually morphs into one of the most intense horror films you'll ever witness. It's definitely a trip worth taking, and trust me, this one's gonna stick with you for a long time. Number 12. Gunfight at the OK Corral, 1957. Coming in at number 12, we've got the classic Gunfight at OK Corral from 1957, directed by John Sturgis. Now, some might argue that this film is too well known for this list, but it doesn't get nearly enough attention. I mean, when you've got both Burt Lancaster and Kirk Douglas in the lead roles, it's a must-watch. Lancaster and Douglas are two of Western fans' all-time favorite actors, and their rich and dynamic friendship is what drives this film. The story revolves around lawman Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday, a dying outlaw. These two unlikely allies eventually find themselves in the middle of the legendary gunfight at the OK Corral. This movie has crazy cinematography. The vibrant colors and the gritty look on the faces of those men in the saloon just add to its charm. Sturgis's direction is, as always, economical and effective. Sure, it might not be the most historically accurate film, but it sure makes for one heck of a thrilling and fun Western flick. Number 11, The Shooting, 1966. Check this out. The Shooting is a bit of an out-there experimental Western flick with none other than Jack Nicholson in the mix. It's directed by the great Monty Hellman, and here's the scoop. You've got a group of total strangers trekking through the desert. Sounds like an adventure, right? Well, not exactly. There's this creepy, mysterious gunman on their tail, and he's making them disappear one by one. Now, what sets this movie apart is its moody vibe. It's like a deep dive into violence and the whole idea of kicking the bucket. Plus, the visuals, stunning. And don't even get me started on that haunting score. It's a trip, my friend. Number 10, The Gunfighter, 1950. Next up is Henry King's 1950 classic, The Gunfighter. This one's a gem for true Western aficionados, especially if you're a fan of Gregory Peck. Unlike those sweeping vistas, we're mostly parked in a cozy little Western town, mainly in a snug saloon. The story tracks Jimmy Ringo, a notorious gunslinger who just can't shake trouble. The opener sets the tone, with a hot-headed cowboy aiming to take Ringo down. But he's had enough and heads back home to reunite with his wife and son, desperate to leave that outlaw life behind. What really stands out are the vibrant characters, each with their own flair. Millard Mitchell and Helen Westcott shine, perfectly complementing Peck's tough and stoic presence. Fans are particularly taken by how the film plays with the cowboy myth. The gossip and tall tales from the townsfolk reveal how truth gets twisted when folks turn real-life figures into legends. And let's not forget, Henry King's direction is spot on, and the black and white cinematography, top-notch. This one's a winner through and through. Number 9, The Man from Snowy River. 1982, Kirk Douglas pops up in The Man from Snowy River, a movie that's kind of like Mad Dog Morgan in the sense that it's set down under in Australia. In this one, we follow a young guy dealing with the loss of his dad and trying to scrape together enough cash to keep the family farm afloat. Now, Douglas, he's a versatile dude, and in this flick, he plays not one but two roles, two brothers to be exact. The rest of the gang on screen is mostly Aussie actors. This movie's pretty famous back in the land of kangaroos and koalas, and it's actually based on a famous poem by Banjo Patterson, same name and all. But you know, outside Australia, it hasn't quite hit the big time yet. Maybe it's time more folks gave it a watch, you reckon? Number 8, The Naked Spur, 1953. Coming in at number 8 is Anthony Mann's The Naked Spurs, starring James Stewart and Janet Leigh. Now Stewart teamed up with Mann for a total of 8 flicks, and 5 of them were good old westerns. But let me tell you, The Naked Spurs really stands out in that bunch. Stewart's character, Howard Kemp, is a far cry from his usual cheery roles. And with stellar performances from Robert Ryan, Ralph Meeker, and Millard Mitchell, this cast is top-notch. The story? Well, it's about bounty hunter Kemp on the hunt for Ben Vandergroat, the murderer. He ends up teaming up with an old prospector named Jesse Tate and a Union soldier, Roy Anderson. But when they find out there's a $5,000 reward on Vandergroat's head, things start to get real messy. Vandergroat knows how to play the game and starts sowing seeds of doubt among the group. And let's not forget Janet Leigh giving a heartwarming performance, and just glad she's not in the shower with any sharp objects. Oh, and the cinematography? It's a feast for the eyes. Shot in Lone Pine, California, and in the scenic San Juan Mountains in Durango, Colorado. This one's a real visual treat. Number 7, The Tall T, 1957. You gotta check out The Tall T. It's a real nail-biter of a western. Randolph Scott plays Pat Brennan, a guy who used to ranch but gets tangled up in a kidnapping scheme. Now he's got to use every trick up his sleeve to outsmart his captors and make a run for it. This flick's a heart-pounding roller coaster from start to finish, and really shows off Scott's chops as the main guy in charge. Trust me, it's one wild ride. Number 6, Man of the West, 1958. Next up from 1958, we've got another Anthony Mann gem, Man of the West, featuring the legendary Gary Cooper. Now, usually I picture Cooper in those comedy roles, like Ball of Fire and Designed for Living, but in this one in High Noon, he shows a whole different side of himself. He nails it as the reformed outlaw, Link Jones, who's kind of forced back into his old gang after a train robbery gone south. And with Julie London as Billy Ellis and Lee Jacob as Doc Tobin, the whole cast brings some serious chemistry to the table. Plus, don't miss the epic brawl with Cooper throwing punches like Justin Gethje in there. The dialogue is sharp, and it all builds up to one heck of an exciting finale that'll have you at the edge of your seat. Number 5, My Darling Clementine, 1946. My Darling Clementine is this awesome movie directed by John Ford, and it's got Henry Fonda playing the legendary lawman Wyatt Earp. It's all about Earp's adventures in Tombstone, Arizona, where he gets caught up in some crazy drama with the Clanton gang. The movie's really cool because it's got some stunning camera work, and it brings these Wild West characters to life in a big way. So if you're into westerns and epic tales, this one's definitely worth a watch. Number 4, The Big Country, 1958. Coming in at number 4 is The Big Country, a 1958 western epic directed by William Wyler. Wyler is hands down one of my all-time favorite directors. From Ben-Hur to Roman Holiday, the guy's a genius. In this one, he tackles the Wild West, and let me tell you, the scenery shots and direction are top-notch. The story is about a New England sea captain played by Gregory Peck who rolls into his fiancée's massive Texas ranch in the 1880s. Trouble brews over some valuable land, and Peck gets caught in the middle. He's not looking for a fight, but folks start thinking he's a pushover, even though he's tougher and more honorable than the lot of them. Charlton Heston is fantastic in this, and the dynamic between him and Peck is electric. Gene Simmons nails it as Julie Merrigan, and Burl Ives won an Academy Award for his standout role as well. Oh, and we can't forget the incredible score by Jerome Moross. It's a symphonic masterpiece that really elevates the whole film. If you're into westerns, this one's a must-see. Number 3, The Ballad of Cable Hogue, 1970. You know Sam Peckinpah, right? The guy who made those super violent and dark westerns like The Wild Bunch and Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. Well, in 1970, he decided to switch things up a bit with The Ballad of Cable Hogue. Surprisingly, it's a Peckinpah film that's not all grim and bloody. The story's about this guy, Cable Hogue, trying to make it in the Old West. Sure, it's got its serious moments, but it's also pretty darn lighthearted compared to Peckinpah's usual stuff. It's a fun and genuinely entertaining movie, and the fact that it stands out from the rest of his work just makes it even more interesting to check out. So if you're up for something different from Peckinpah, give this one a shot. Number 2, Destry Rides Again, 1939. Number 2 on the list is George Marshall's 1939 Western comedy, Destry Rides Again. This film was all about poking fun at the westerns of its time, but it ended up becoming one of the best in the genre, in my book. James Stewart is brilliant as Tom Destry Jr., with his calm and soothing vibes standing out in a town full of nastiness. Don't be fooled, though. Destry's a sharpshooter who can outdraw anyone in a heartbeat. The story is set in the unruly, corrupt town of Bottleneck. When the last sheriff gets off for asking too many questions, Destry's sent in to take over. Brian Donnelly plays the shady saloon owner Kent and makes a great antagonist. And Marlena Dietrich as the saloon singer Frenchie. She's witty, tough, and knows how to handle herself. The saloon scenes are a hoot, and Frenchie's songs really stir things up, not to mention one of the most epic catfights ever seen on screen. This is such a good film. It's funny, charming, lively, and can hit you right in the feels when it wants to. The black and white cinematography, the performances, the music, all of it makes this an absolute classic that any Western fan will love. Number 1, Duck, You Sucker, 1971. And at number 1, Sergio Leone, the dude behind those epic westerns, made some real gems. You got your classics like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly from 1966, which is like top tier in the Western world. But let's talk about his last Western, Duck, You Sucker. It doesn't always get the love it deserves, but honestly, it's right up there with his other flicks. This one's set in the early 1910s, smack dab in the middle of the Mexican Revolution. It's all about this bandit and a dynamite expert who end up as buddies in the middle of this whole mess. It's kind of weird, but in a totally captivating way. You've got humor, tragedy, and some serious action all mixed up, and it works like a charm. Trust me, it's one of the best westerns ever made, and it's a bit of an unsung hero in the genre. And there you have it, folks, our list of the top 20 westerns you've never seen. Bet you found your next movie night pick. I hope you enjoyed this journey through some hidden gems in the western genre. All right, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.